The Minnesota Timberwolves are a team that can look like they are going to contend for a championship one day and then look like a play-in team the very next. So, which are they really? A contender or a play-in team? We all know that the Minnesota Timberwolves have finals hopes. They have great supporting pieces around their debatable top 5 player in the NBA, in Anthony Edwards. They have the talent. Their results just don't line up. Hello everyone and welcome back to Step Back with Zach, and in today's video I want to talk about how frustratingly confusing the Minnesota Timberwolves are. Before we go any further though, please don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I am about to sneeze. Bless me. It is my goal to hit 100 subscribers before April, so your subscription would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. The Minnesota Timberwolves currently sit with a 28-19 record and are the 7th seed out east, losing the tiebreaker to the Phoenix Suns at the moment. They also have debatably a top 5 player, no doubt though in anyone's mind a top 8 player in Anthony Edwards. And alongside Anthony Edwards, they've got really good supporting pieces like a Julius Randle, who's averaging 22.2 points per game this season, Jaden McDaniels, who's having a career year averaging 14.8 points per game and is still an absolutely defensive menace. Although his defense has slipped a little bit, he's still a great wing defender. They also have Rudy Gobert, who's having a great defensive season himself, anchoring the paint down low, looking like one of the best defensive players in the NBA. And of course, Minnesota's fan favorite, Naz Reid, who is an absolutely insane bench piece and is debatably one of the best bench players in the entire association that we have, and is the main source of offense coming off the bench for that Minnesota side. Donte DiVincenzo as well is someone that I need to mention here. He's been running the point guard an awful lot, 4th in total made threes this season. Crazy stuff. But I do want to talk about Anthony Edwards right now, because in 37 games this year, he's averaging a career high 29.7 points per game, along with 5.2 rebounds and 3.6 assists to go along with 1.2 steals and just shy of a block per night on 49.9% shooting and 41% from 3 on 8.5 attempts. Truly insane efficiency from Anthony Edwards, as well as a 79.3% from the free throw line, which is actually worse than the past few seasons, but that's fine, on a career high 62.5% true shooting. And he, like I just said, has clearly established himself as a top 8 player and potentially a top 5. He's absolutely improved in the mid-range this season, where we know last year he said he's got to get better at it, and of course he has, and his decision making has gotten a lot better as well. Anthony Edwards can very clearly now, no doubt in my mind, be the best player on a championship contending team. The Timberwolves as well have been to back-to-back conference finals, where we know that back in 2024 they lost to the Dallas Mavericks in 5 games, and then last year against the OKC Thunder, they lost to them in 5 games as well. So they have made it to the conference finals, however, they have had their asses absolutely handed to them. And finally, they sit 10th in offense and 6th in defense, one of only 4 teams who are in the top 10 for both. But the reality of the Minnesota Timberwolves is much different to what these stats all say. A big narrative that the Minnesota Timberwolves had starting the season was their inability to beat teams over 500, and that has still kind of held true. However, they have gotten better, but they are still sitting with a losing record of 11-14 above teams over 500, which is the worst amongst the top teams out west. They are tied with the Phoenix Suns for that. However, though, after losing their first 7 games against teams above 500, they have since gone 11-7. Still not great, but it's definitely not that bad either. And this slow start against teams over 500 actually kind of held them to a slow start in general. They started the season 12-8 through their first 20 games, but then went a little bit stronger, going 14-6 in their next 20, which is better obviously. However though, their last 7 games have been kind of rough. They have gone 2-5. However though, those 5 losses were all consecutive, meaning they lost 5 in a row. They did lose very close games against some top teams, where they just lost to the Houston Rockets without Anthony Edwards. However, the next game after that, they lost to the San Antonio Spurs again in a close game, where Anthony Edwards dropped a career high 55 points. How are you going to lose a game where your best player drops 55 points? That's nuts. But then after those 2, they went on to lose against teams like the Jazz and the Bulls, and then they got absolutely blown out by the Golden State Warriors. And all that came after their best stretch of the season. They won 7 out of their last 9 games before that losing streak. So how does that even happen? They have also had some pretty embarrassing losses this year against teams like the Kings and the Grizzlies and the Brooklyn Nets. And this ultimately shows a very consistent trend of inconsistency for the Minnesota Timberwolves. They can absolutely pour it on and look like a true contender and then go to losing consecutive games where they just look like frauds. Earlier in the season, I did a contenders and pretenders video, and I actually had the Minnesota Timberwolves as pretenders in that video, and I kinda am still backing myself there. This team also doesn't have a good point guard. Yes, they've got Mike Conley, but he's like 40 now. He's so far past his prime. And then you got Bones Highland, who's also been like a really solid piece for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's averaging like 6.5 points. But again, not the starting kind of point guard that you want. And then Rob Dillingham, who they actually traded up for, traded with the Spurs, thank you so much for that, by the way, has just not looked good at all. He's getting DNPs regularly. Those are just not guys that you want running the offense in the big 2026. And the lack of a point guard has really hurt them in the clutch especially. They have been starting Dante DiVincenzo at the 1, however, he's not a point guard. He's an off guard. We've seen a consistent trend in the NBA where not having a good point guard actually kind of hinders you. We've seen teams like the Rockets do it this year, and the Portland Trail Blazers, and the Dallas Mavericks, and the Atlanta Hawks do it. However, the Houston Rockets are very clearly missing Fred VanVleet. Denny Avdi is basically a point forward, so they're fine there. The Dallas Mavericks are just lost, and the Atlanta Hawks, Jalen Johnson's been really solid, but they've also been slipping as of late. So you need a good point guard. But going back to their clutch games, they currently sit 11-11 in clutch games, where they're averaging roughly around 10.4 points per game on 50% shooting. However, most of this is because of Anthony Edwards, who is debatably the clutch player of the year. I'm not quite there. I'd say that he's second, only behind SGA at the moment, but Anthony Edwards is the main reason that this team is even somewhat winning in the clutch. Anthony Edwards is averaging the third most points per game in the clutch at 5.6 on 62.5% shooting and 45.8% from 3. And he's also got 95 total clutch points this season, sitting him at 4th in the entire league. So again, half of the points that come from the clutch are from Anthony Edwards for this Minnesota Timberwolves team, and without him this season, they are 2-3 in clutch games. To make a trade for a point guard, however, especially for someone that you want that's going to be competent enough for this roster to really help them push for that championship, they will need to trade one of their big name salary guys, because this team is in the first apron, meaning that they have to trade more than what they're bringing back, if that kind of makes sense. They can't make a trade for someone that's making more money than the players they are trading. So to get a good enough point guard, they're going to need to either trade Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, or Naz Reid. And I don't think they're going to trade Julius Randle, unfortunately. We'll get into him real soon. I don't think they're going to trade Rudy Gobert. They could trade Jaden McDaniels, but I think he's too valuable as a wing defender and a POA guy. So that ultimately leaves Naz Reid, and Naz Reid is such a fan favorite, and he is, as I mentioned earlier in the video, their main source of offense off the bench, and without him, they are completely inept when their starters are sitting. Their bench averages 32.8 points per game on 43.6% shooting, and roughly 15 of those points come from Naz Reid. Without Naz Reid, their bench unit just fails. It fails. Naz Reid is so good for this Minnesota team. However, if they are wanting to go and get an actual point guard, they are going to need to trade him because they've got too much money tied up in all the aforementioned players. Now, Julius Randle. I don't even know where to begin with him, because sometimes he can look so dominant and so good, and other times he can look like such a waste of space and like such a waste of a roster spot. He is, just like this team's identity, very inconsistent. And in my opinion, he cannot be your second best player if you're wanting to win a championship. We've seen what Julius Randle does against good defenses. Nothing. Ultimately, last year in the playoffs, Julius Randle actually played quite solid and really started to break the narrative of him being a playoff choker. He had a really dominant first round series against the Lakers, who, keep in mind, didn't have any good defenders, and then against the Golden State Warriors, where he actually averaged just shy of 26 points a game, and Draymond Green actually admitted that Julius Randle got the better of him. But that is the only time Julius Randle has been in the playoffs where we've seen him actually be somewhat dominant, or playing at the Julius Randle level, and he was even playing above the Julius Randle level. But that OKC series, and although they are a historically good defense, that is a great example of why he can't be your second best player. Julius Randle has also struggled against teams above 500 this year. He hasn't really done well against the Spurs. He did pretty well against the Houston Rockets, but the Houston Rockets can kind of be soft on defense sometimes, which is crazy to say. Quick pause on that. Good grief. But against the teams that are less than 500 or against teams that are not very great at defending, he does kind of well. He can be a third option, sure, but as a second option, I can't see it. He has been labeled as a playoff choker for a reason in the past. It is wide knowledge across the NBA community, especially before last season, that he has not been a good playoff performer. But Julius Randle as well, going back to the clutch, he has been god awful. One of the worst top players in the clutch this year. He has a total of 34 points, 1.5 points per game, in 22 total clutch games this year on a disgusting 36% field goal shooting, and is currently, at the time of recording, shooting 0 for 7 from 3 in the clutch. And he has the second most total turnovers, only behind first place by 1 with 13. Julius Randle, why do you have the ball that much in your hands during the clutch? Stop it. Stop. Cut it out. So I beg the question to you guys, can you really trust him to have such an important role on a team that wants to win it all? In my opinion, no. No, no, no. Absolutely not. The Minnesota Timberwolves currently have the 8th hardest strength of schedule remaining, where they've got 2 games left against OKC, 2 against Detroit. They've got 1 more against Denver, 2 more against Houston, and 1 more against Boston. So they can pull out some wins here, but again, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust them. I love Anthony Edwards. That dude is incredible. One of the best players in the league, but Julius Randle and that supporting cast just has to be better. And Chris Finch, in my opinion, is also not that great of a head coach. Like, he does not run good lineups at times, and the 11-11 performance in the clutch as well is in big part his fault. Like, the plays that you need to run during the clutch are done by the coach, and a lot of the time their play calls just have not been good. But that is all from me for this video. Let me know if you agree with my takes about the Minnesota Timberwolves, and if you're a Timberwolves fan, what do you think of the team this year? I really like them. I really like Anthony Edwards, and Jaden McDaniels is one of my favorite role players in the entire NBA, and although I don't like Rudy Gobert that much, I still want the best for them. However, I don't trust them. Like I said in the intro, please don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.